about one father. And so we talked about the parable of the prodigal son, but I suggested it's more appropriately named the parable of the two brothers, or of the two sons. And so last week we talked about how there was this youngest son, and he was disobedient, and he was rebellious, and he was manipulative. And he kind of broke his father's heart. But then we also talked about an older brother, and this dude was angry, and he was bitter, and he was jealous. And here's the thing, in the story, both brothers were wrong. Like, they were wrong in what they were doing. But at the end of the story, we saw that the father, the loving father, ran to the end of the road to meet his son, to cut his son off, and he met him and confronted him with grace. This youngest son that was rebellious, he met him and he confronted him with grace. But then we looked about how he did the same exact thing with the older brother. And the older brother had to be confronted with, oh, wow, like, I'm not accepting and I'm not forgiving. He, too, is confronted by grace, but in a more convicting way. So we got two brothers, a younger brother and an older brother, and both of them get confronted with grace. And we saw in the story that at the end, the main character, the father, runs to the end of the road, and pay attention to this, throws his arms around his son and embraces him and weeps. So that was last week. Well, this week, we're going to get into a story that really closely parallels the story when we went through last week. And we're going to go way back in Scripture to look at the story of Jacob and Esau. So, we're going to be in Genesis today, if you have your Bibles with you. We are going to be flying through a lot of text. We're going to be in Genesis 25 through 33. So if you want to get your Bibles out, that's cool. If you got your Bibles or Bibles on your phone. But one of the things I'm really adamant about when I teach is I don't like to just parachute drop you into a passage. And you have no idea where we are, who we're talking about, what's been going on, no context. So I need to give you a little bit of background of where we're at in Genesis. And in this particular spot in Genesis, it's called the patriarchal period. You don't need to remember that. All you need to know is it's about these kind of founding fathers of the faith. It's after Noah and the flood, and there's this guy named Abraham. And God appears to Abraham, and he decides, whoa. Through this guy, Abraham, God says, I'm going to bless all peoples of the earth. Everyone say, bless. Nice. So he's going to bless. There's some late ones on that one. Okay, good. At least you're participating. So he's going to bless all peoples of the earth because that God always has an agenda for that. So he comes to this guy, Abraham, makes a covenant with him, and he says, Abraham, through you and your descendants, I'm going to bless. Everyone say bless. He says, I'm going to bless all peoples of the earth and all peoples that come after you, Abraham. And he says, you're going to live in a good land, and your descendants are going to be as numerous as the sand on the seashore. That's a lot of people. So this is a promise God makes, and this is a covenant. This is like agreement God makes with Abraham. And then, what's more, God makes the same covenant with Abraham's son, Isaac. So he appears to Isaac, makes the exact same promise. He says, I'm going to bless, everyone say bless, all peoples of the earth through you. You're going to have a good land to dwell in. I'm going to make you prosperous, and your descendants are going to be as numerous as the sand on the seashores. So you have to remember that this is the family line that we are tracing in this part of Genesis, and we're following this promise of blessing. Well, this is where our story picks up today. This guy named Isaac, who is Abraham's son, gets married to a beautiful woman named Rebecca, and they have a baby. Or she gets pregnant. Now, that was a weird response. All right, so she gets pregnant. And she's having a rough pregnancy. Not that any pregnancy is easy, but she's having a particularly rough pregnancy. And so she praises the Lord. She's like, God, what's going on in there? There's a lot of stuff going on in here. I'm not real sure. Like, this isn't feeling good. And so God appears to her, and he says, hold up. This is what's happening. 2 nations are warring in your womb. One is stronger than the other, and the oldest one is going to serve the youngest one. Okay, so some of us are going, okay, I don't really know what that means. Okay, first thing to notice, how many nations does God say are warring in her womb? Hold it up, 2. So she's having twins. Oh, okay, so she just found that out. Okay, well, I'm having twins. Okay, so she's got twins in there. Now, here's another thing that's weird. He says 2 nations are warring in your womb. In this day, in this age, and in this culture, one woman would have multiple children. They would all be considered part of the same family or the same nation. Okay, so normally, like again, she would have a baby. They would both be part of this nation, part of Abraham's family. God's predicting that they're actually going to have this division. They're going to have this split, and they're going to form 2 different people groups. This is what God's predicting. And he says the oldest one is going to be way stronger than the youngest one, but the oldest one is going to serve the youngest one. Now, again, we read right over that. Oh, okay, that sounds fine. No. In their culture and in this time, that didn't happen. The youngest always served the oldest. Now, remember this. In this culture, you always wanted to be an oldest child. I told you a little bit about being an oldest child in the culture last week, but in this Old Testament context, being an oldest child had advantages. One, you would get what's called a blessing and a birthright. A blessing and a birthright. And you wanted this. Because with this blessing, this is something that people coveted back then. They wanted a blessing. We think like blessing is like saying the prayer before you eat. No, blessing was everything to these people. It gave your life purpose and value and promise. So you would get a special blessing from your father if you were the oldest. So that was sweet and you wanted that. Secondly, as the oldest child, you were the boss of all the younger siblings. And so even when your father died, you could split up the inheritance. So you can be like, a little for you, a little for you. You don't get any. A little for you, no, not so much. You get some, and I get a lot. And in fact, that's kind of the third thing. If you're an oldest child, not only could you divide up the father's estate, but you got a bigger share of the estate. So being the oldest child, that was a nice place to be. You wanted to be an oldest child, so you could get the blessing, which was coveted, and the birthright. So you got a bigger share of the inheritance and could split it up. So God's saying there are these two babies, these two nations warring in your womb. Well, Rebecca ends up giving birth. The first child comes out nice and easy. I don't want to pantomime this. Okay, the first child is born and comes out nice and easily, but then they notice something really weird. So as the doctor's delivering the baby, apparently he's hiking a football, sorry. He's delivering the baby. He pulls the baby out, and there's another baby attached to this baby because the other baby is holding the other baby's heel. The second baby's holding the first baby's heel. So it's coming out. I always put myself in like the position of the doctor. It'd be like a weird magic trick where you'd be like, how many babies are on this thing? Like you just keep pulling like a barrel of monkeys. How many babies are up in there? So there's two, and the second child is grabbing the heel of the first. Okay, that's weird. We'll talk about that. So these children are given names. Now, names are terribly significant in the Old Testament. They said a lot about how you looked, about your personality, and about your life. And sometimes names would even kind of predict your future or speak into your future. So the first baby's name is Esau. Now, it's actually pronounced, I'm really picky about how I pronounce people's names because I don't want to be rude. So his name is actually Esau. Okay, so everyone say Esau. That's the first one. Someone said Esau. Okay, nice accent. Esau. That's the first child, the oldest. And the second one is Jacob. Everyone say Jacob. Very well done. Now, Jacob, we have to look at his name because, again, Old Testament names are significant. So what does Jacob's name mean? We need to know. We need to figure this out. Jacob's name, it's from this Hebrew verb. It means to grab one's heel. But it can also mean deceiver. Like, what? That doesn't even make sense, right? He grabs one heel, deceiver. What's that even mean? Well, in the Hebrew culture, the culture of this day, the heel was perceived as a place of weakness and vulnerability. It was a place that you could exploit. So if you ever thought about, and they kind of think it's more like where the Achilles tendon is, as what scholars kind of guess. So have you ever heard of like an Achilles heel, show of hands? Like, oh, that person's Achilles heel, their weak spot. Yeah, that's what the heel was considered in this culture. So Jacob is given this name, heel grabber, manipulator. And basically what they're saying is, this kid is going to try to exploit people's weaknesses and he's going to try to deceive people. And spoiler alert, that's exactly what he's going to do in the story today. He lives up to his name. So let me tell you a little bit about these two, and then we're going to really launch into the story. So then Esau, everyone say Esau. He's the oldest one. He is, it says that he's born with red hair all over his body. He says it's like a fur cloak on his body. So he's this really hairy guy. He grows up to be this really hairy, burly, redheaded guy. And he's a man of the woods. He's a huntsman. He likes to go hunt and kill things and shop at Cabela's probably. And he's probably sporting camo a lot. And like he's about that life, hunting, fishing, all that stuff. That's Esau, the oldest. Jacob, the youngest one, he says he's a more gentle or quiet man. So he's probably like wearing skinny jeans at home playing Fortnite. You see what I'm saying? Like he's more of like about exploring the great indoors. So that's Jacob. So Esau's the older one, and then Jacob is the younger one. Outdoorsman and kind of stay at home kind of guy. Now, this is significant to the story. Esau is favored by his father Isaac. He's a daddy's boy. Isaac loves Jacob, or Esau, favors him. Jacob is favored by his mom, Rebekah. So he's kind of a mama's boy, okay? So remember that in the story. Esau, he's favored by Isaac. Jacob is favored by Rebekah, his mom. So the text launches into this story about this initial conflict between the two brothers. And I want to kind of show you this with some people on the stage and act this out for you. So I need Esau to come out. Everyone give it up for Esau. Red-headed, majestic, bearded, strong. Very good. All right, you're going to be over here. You're going to be over there. All right, then we've got Jacob. Bring him out, bring him out, bring him out. Jacob. Give it up for Jacob. Hey. All right, here, you're right here, you're right here. Yeah, you're there for now. And I'll move you guys around. All right, so we have this first altercation between the two. And the text says, one day, Esau goes out into the woods to hunt because that's what he does, right? He hunts, he fishes, and he shots at cabela's. So he's going to go hunt in the woods. So just kind of come over here. So he's off doing his thing. Problem is, he loses track of the time, and he wears himself out. And he's hungry, and he's thirsty, and he's famished, and he's dying, and he basically crawls home. So I need you to come over here. Jacob, you stand right there. Now, as he's coming home, and he's starving to death, Jacob is at home cooking up a little snack, cooking up a little soup. It's soup. Are you flipping a pizza? What was that? Okay, soup. So bigger bowl. Okay, like a cauldron. Go with like a cauldron. Okay, that's good. He's making soup. What do you got up in there? Some salt, pepper?
No, some Chef Boyardee, man.
Some Chef Boyardee. Okay, he's apparently making SpaghettiOs. And so, no, ravioli? Okay. And so, you're exhausted. I need you to crawl home. You're exhausted. He's dying, right? And oh man, this is good. Okay, and he reaches up for it and out for his brother. Reach up. And he says, I'm starving. Don't feed this man yet. See, Jacob sees an opportunity. He's begging for food. And Jacob, the deceiver, the one who's looking to exploit someone's weakness, sees this man in weakness. And he goes, I'm going to grab his heel. I'm going to exploit this man. And so he asks for food. And he says, he's very dancy. All right. And he says, Jacob was a great dancer. All right. And he asks for food. And he says, okay, but hold up. Give me your birthright. Cough it up. Give me your birthright. Again, the oldest son always had the birthright, and the youngest son coveted that because he'd get a bigger share in the inheritance, and he would get to divvy up the inheritance upon the father's death. So he was about that life, okay? All right, good. All right, I like what you're doing there. All right, so he asked for that. And in a moment of weakness, being exploited, he gives it to him. Now, it's not something you actually give away, but he just says, hey, you can have my birthright. He feeds them. It's all good. Next scene. All right, go back to your places. Now, what we see in this is there's this first instance where Jacob is truly a heel grabber because he sees him in his moment of weakness and he exploits him. And this little conflict is just kind of boiling like that stew he was making, or it's kind of brewing, but it's going to boil over into a big, much bigger issue. And that's where the second conflict comes in. Now, in the second conflict, I have to introduce two more characters. Isaac, come on out. The father, you come on out. Hey. I mean, you acting like you're bashful. You're not. All right, so you're over here. Father Isaac, okay? Now, at this point in the story, Isaac is old and feeble and hurting, and he's almost blind. Now, pick up on this. He's basically going blind. This man looks not good, okay? And he's going blind. He can't really see, and he's kind of going senile. So I thought you'd be a great person for this job. So he's sick. He's dying, and he's going to say something important to Esau. But before we get into that, I have to introduce another character. The mother needs to come out. Rebekah, come on out. Give it up for Rebekah. Woo! Now, Rebekah's just kind of sitting here chilling, and she's overhearing what's going to happen. Now, here's what the father, Isaac, says to the oldest son, Esau. He says, hey. I don't have much longer. I'm kind of dying. And he says, as my last wish, I want you to go kill my favorite animal and cook it up for me and give it to me. And I'm going to eat that junk. And because I don't know how much longer I have. Okay? Now, here's what's weird. I know the rest of the story. Isaac's got a while to live. Like, he lives for a lot longer. So he's totally playing the old man like I'm dying card, which is rude. But I'm totally going to do that when I'm older. Like, all my kids are going to be like, guys, this could be my last Christmas. You got to go big, okay? So, like, I'm totally going to use that when I'm older. Side note. So he sends him off to go get food. And here's the thing. Before he does, he goes, if you do this for me, I'm going to give you my blessing. Rewind. As the oldest, you got the blessing and the birthright, and you always wanted the blessing and the birthright. He gave his birthright away like a dummy, but now he's still going to get his blessing. So he's like, go kill this animal, make me some food, and you'll get the blessing. So he goes off to the woods. You don't really have to. You just can pretend. Oh, you can actually go off. Yeah, go off into the woods. Now, Rebecca, she hears about this, okay? She's sneaky. So she calls Jacob over, and she's like, hold up. We got a plan. We're going to run a play on your dad. We're going to clown him. Here's how we're going to do it. You're going to pretend to be your brother because your dad's old. He's senile. He can't really see really well, so we're going to trick him. Yeah. Rude. Just stop. Okay. Do I need to get someone else for this? All right. So, oh my gosh. All right, stop. Only do what I tell you. All right, so then, man, you may lose my place. Okay. So, no, thank you. All right. So anyway, she's like, we're gonna run a play. You're gonna impersonate your brother. Here's what I want you to do. Go get some goats. Kill them. You're gonna make goat stew. Your dad loves goat stew. Okay. He wants that goat stew. Then take the goat's hair, wrap it around yourself. Because remember, Esau is really hairy. Jacob is not. So he's just going to wrap it around his neck, and he's going to wrap it around his arms, so he's going to, like, feel like he's hairy. And then she says, go get your brother's clothes, put them on, so you smell like him. So he goes and basically impersonates his brother. And then he brings food to his father. Let's go, Jacob. Let's go over here. Here we go. There you go. That's you. So then he goes to his dad, and we're not going to get into the details here, but he fools his dad. He totally tricks his dad. His dad kind of feels his arms, okay? He's like, you've been working out? All right. And then he feels his face. Like, oh, yikes. And he's like, okay, well, look, smells like him, feels like him, must be good to go. And he speaks a blessing over him. So just put your hand out like you're speaking a blessing. Get your blessing. All right. And so he's giving him his blessing. Now, this blessing sounds a lot like the covenant, the promise and the blessing that God promises to Abraham and to Isaac, and now it's being passed to Jacob. But here's the problem. The blessing is supposed to be passed to the oldest, Esau. So Jacob is deceiving his father. And his father's weakness and feeble condition, there you go, and apparently in his freezing coldness, he exploits his weakness and takes advantage of him. So Jacob gets the blessing, and he skips back home to mom. Now, real quick, remember, his mom did this because his mom favors him. He's a mama's boy. She's looking out for her son. So we think everything's good. Jacob totally got away with it. Not so fast. Here's what happens next. I know I scared you. All right, so Esau comes back. Come back in the picture. Esau comes back. Fee, fi, fo, fum. Here we go. So he comes up, and he looks for his blessing. He's like, hey, Dad, where's my blessing? Where's my blessing at? And the dad freaks out. He starts shaking and freaking out. He can't believe what happened. Oh, my gosh, what's even happening? And so he realizes he gave the blessing to the wrong son. Oh, snap. So then, here's what happens. Esau becomes enraged, burn, like smolder. He's angry, and he says, surely Jacob has earned his name, because his name means deceiver, heel grabber, exploiter. He has earned his name. He has now deceived me, not once, but twice. And then it says, now pay attention to this, we're going to get to this later. It says he starts to form a grudge, okay? Everyone say grudge. It's going to be important later. He forms a grudge. And then he makes a vow, and he says, as soon as you die, I know, it's so rude. As soon as you die, old man, it's like he's trying to kill him off. All right. As soon as you die, I'm going to kill Jacob. Ooh. And so Rebecca, again, she's spying on him. She hears this, and she freaks out, and she goes, Jacob, hold on, come here, huddle up again. Huddle up. Okay, so your brother, yeah, he's going to kill you. Yeah. Wait, how does it make you feel?
I got wheels, so, like, he can't really catch me, but, if I, like...
Not true. You're weak. You have no wheels. All right, he's going to hunt you down and kill you. So here's what Rebecca tells him to do. She says, go stay at your uncle's. You're going to go to this foreign land, and you're going to stay with your uncle until your brother kind of settles down. Now, spoiler alert, she's being kind of naive about this. Parents tend to downplay like how their kids are acting. Like I've seen kids like throw fits before and like flip over furniture, and parents are just like, that's just how he processes. That's how he processes. No, like he's freaking out. That's what his mom's doing. She's like, he's a little upset. Just go away to your uncle's and he'll be fine. Well, he ends up leaving and going to his uncle's. Spoiler alert, he has to stay there for 20 years. It took this man apparently 20 years to calm down and to chill out. So, this is where we get into the next stage of our story. So, all right, so at this point, Isaac, you're off. Rebecca, you're off. Give it up for him, guys. Give it up for him. So, Jacob's in this foreign lands with his uncle. A lot happens here we don't have time for. Here's 2 things you need to take away. Everyone hold up a 2. 2 things you need to take away and you need to know. 1, he starts a family, and he has 12 sons. 12 sons. They will later become known as the 12 tribes of Israel. 2, he accumulates great wealth and a large estate. Okay, so these are the 2 things that happen while he's in this foreign land. But notice, connections from last week. The youngest son, who's rebellious and disobedient, he has to go off to a far country. Just like in the story we talked about last week, as the son took his father's inheritance and went to a far country. So he's out here. But as he's in this far country, he's killing it. He's got a family. He's got a lot of wealth. He's doing well. But here's what happens. God calls him to go back home. Oh, snap. Now, why would Jacob not be super excited about going home? Why? Yeah, Esau wants to kill him. Last he heard, if he comes home, this dude's going to kill him. But he wants to be obedient to God, which is rare for Jacob. So here's what happens. He comes, and he starts to come home. He kind of tiptoes home, and he stops. And he formulates a plan. And he says, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to send 3 waves of gifts to my brother. I'm going to send him 3 waves of offerings. And here's what I hope is going to happen. I hope that he will see these and he'll forgive me. Okay? And it says that these gifts will actually serve as this. There's a word in Hebrew. It's kafar. Everyone say kafar. Kafar. Nice. You said it's so weird. All right. Kafar. It means atonement. He hopes these gifts will be a kafar, an atonement. Now, what an atonement was if you had someone who was angry with you, someone who rightly deserved to punish you for things you had done wrong, you could use a gift as an atonement, and you could it could stand in between you two, and it was also known as a peace offering. It would make peace. So if you were wanting to kill me because I had wronged you, and I'm in the wrong, and I'm guilty, I could offer you a kafar, an atonement, a gift that would hopefully subside your anger and put me in good standing with you again, and we would have peace. So that's this dude's plan. He's going to send all these gifts out ahead of him. But before he does that, he sends a spy to go check out the situation. He's like, okay, I got this plan. Now I need to see what's going on. So he sends a spy over. And the spy's supposed to see what's going on with Esau. Here's what the spy reports back. Oh, snap. He runs home, and he's like, okay, your brother, he's got 400 fighting men, and they all want to kill you. No, they don't say they want to kill him, but he says they have 400 fighting men waiting for you. Now, is Esau happy with Jacob? No. So this is not good news for our man Jacob. So he's scared. So Jacob does something he hasn't done in this entire story, something that's rare for him. He bows down to pray. So just bow down to pray. How you do it? There you go. All right, there you go. He bows down to pray. He humbles himself. And he actually becomes honest before God, which again is something he's never done. This dude's always playing people, manipulating people, trying to get what he can get. So he prays to God and he says, God, I realize that all that I have is because of you. And I'm afraid of my brother, so I'm going to ask for your protection. I'm going to say thank you for your grace, because everything I have is just because of your grace and your kindness. And so this is a weird character move for Jacob, because he doesn't normally do this. So then Judgment Day comes. He stands up and he realizes he's prayed now. He's humbled himself of his wicked ways, and he's going to approach his brother. Now here's how he does it. He does it slow and methodically. As he approaches his brother, with every step, he bows down before his brother. So take a step, bow down. Now this seems weird. Yep. And then get up, and then stay in one place, and then bow down again. And he does this 7 times. Now we see this and we're like, what's this guy doing? What is this? What? In this culture, this was a gesture of peace. All right, and you can hold it there. This is a workout for you. You're like doing like half burpees. Okay. He is extending this gesture towards his brother. This is a gesture of repentance and of humility. And he does not know how this is going to go. This could go poorly. And in fact, tactically speaking, this isn't a smart idea because he's making himself vulnerable to his brother's wrath. So as he's drawing near to his brother, go ahead and stand up. He's waiting. And here's what happens. I need you to run in place, run in place, run in place, run in place. He sees his brother running at him. Now here's what we would expect. If we see Esau running at Jacob, we think it's probably not for a good reason. He has vowed to kill Jacob on sight, and he's sprinting towards him. So imagine your greatest enemy, the person that wants to do you the most harm, sprinting at you. So what we expect here is for him to run and maybe punch him in the face. Or maybe run and stab him. Who knows? This is what we expect from the story. Here's what actually happens. He runs at him, run at him, run at him, run at him. He hugs him. He falls on his neck. Time out, freeze. Remember in the story last week, I said the father ran to the end of the road and he fell on his son's neck. That was like a weird way of saying he embraced him. Same wording is used in this story. He fell on his neck and he embraced him in grace. Now, here's what happens. They separate. And then Jacob says, okay. I had these like 3 waves of presents prepared for you, and it's all good. And so Esau goes, yeah. Who? What is all this? Who are all these people? What is all this that you're offering to me? All this good, all these presents? And then Jacob says, it's something I brought for you, so you won't be mad at me. And so like I'm so relieved that you're not mad. So these are for you. And then Esau, who has been wronged, who would be just in either punching or killing his brother or taking all the presents his brother is offering him, he says 3 words. Ready for it? I have enough. I have enough. He's content with what he has. He realizes that God has blessed him with much. And so he's like, I'm good. But then Jacob, he insists. He goes, no, I promise. Like, take what I have. It's for you. This is for your blessing. And it's kind of weird because Jacob's trying to give him back the blessing that Jacob took. He's like, this blessing is for you. And then Jacob says, the Lord has dealt kindly with me. Or some translations read, the Lord has dealt graciously with me. And then he says 3 words, I have enough. What was that? I have enough. He was listening. I have enough. And in the story, they both realize that God has blessed them with much. God has been gracious to both of them. And there's no bitterness. There's no jealousy between them. They're both just like, no, I'm good. I have enough. God has been good. And they make up, they're good. And then years later, they even show up to their father's funeral together and bury him together. And there's peace there. So, nicely done, guys. All right, now separate. All right, so let's see. You go stand over there again. You go stand over there again. So we see in the story, like I said at the beginning, a lot of parallels to the message last week. A lot of similarities between last week. We have a youngest son who is disobedient and rebellious and manipulative, and he has to go off to a far country, and he has wronged the person back home. And we have the oldest who is angry and bitter and jealous, and he has to be open and kind and forgiving to the brother who has done wrong. And in both stories, we see someone running to someone, just like the father ran to the youngest son and fell on his neck and embraced him in grace. So we see Esau in this story run to his brother, fall on his neck, and embrace him in grace. And neither party's holding anything against each other because they're like, hey, God has been gracious to both of us. We have enough. And so in both stories, we see grace confronting people where they're at. We see forgiveness and acceptance. So let me ask you this today. Just like last week, which brother are you in the story? Perhaps, we don't want people to root for you. You did the wrong thing. But perhaps you're like Jacob. Perhaps you have wronged someone. Perhaps you've hurt someone. Perhaps you have manipulated someone. And you're in the wrong. And maybe today, just like Jacob, you need to humble yourself. You need to repent before the Lord and before the person you've wronged. And I know asking for forgiveness is a hard thing, but maybe today you just need to take that initial step forward. Just as he slowly approached, kind of cautiously and tentatively, maybe you need to make that step today. And in groups, we're going to talk about this. We're going to ask you to write down the name of someone that you need to ask forgiveness from. So I want you to start thinking about that now and praying about that now. Who's someone you need to ask for forgiveness from? But maybe you're not Jacob in the story. Maybe you feel more today like Esau. And maybe you feel like you've been wronged and you've been hurt, or you've been abandoned, or you've been manipulated, and you're kind of angry, and you're bitter about it. And you, just like Esau, have formed a grudge. Everyone say grudge. And this has just stirred a lot of negative feelings in you. And here's the thing. I would never downplay this. This is a serious thing. Some of you have hurts from siblings, just like in the story. Some of you have had siblings that have bullied you your whole life. Maybe they've talked down to you your whole life. You know, maybe that they set a bar so high, you feel like your whole life you've been kind of chasing after them, or you've been trying to live up to their high standards. And you have some bitterness because of this. Maybe today, more intense, maybe you have some wounds from parents or other people in your life. Maybe you've been hurt by abandonment. My cousin, Sean, he grew up with us most of his life because his dad left him when he was just a baby. Maybe you've had that as part of your experience. And you've had to struggle with, just like Jacob abandoned his brother in the story, maybe you've had to wrestle with that, and that brings up a lot of negative feelings. Maybe you've been coerced or manipulated in some way. Maybe you've even experienced some kind of abuse in your past. And so that's real, and you form these grudges, and this bitterness starts to form. Or maybe, again, maybe with parents or with someone else in your life, you feel this weight of expectation, or you see this favoritism, just like Rebecca favored Jacob. Maybe you've experienced that favoritism before, and you're like, okay, well, great, I have like 0 to no value. Awesome, thanks. And so there's heaviness in this. There are wounds here. And with some of this stuff, yeah, in your life, you need healthy boundaries. You know, if you've struggled with abandonment before, yeah, sometimes you have to insulate yourself from that and protect yourself from that. If you've experienced abuse before, you have to create healthy boundaries and healthy separation. You got to tell people about that. You got to let someone know and let someone in on that. But here, a lot of this stuff has to do with our hearts, not our actions. I'm not saying, well, if someone's continually hurt you, go straight back to them. No. But in your hearts, you should not form that grudge. There's always room for grace. And we're going to talk about that more here in just 1 second. There's always room for grace. Maybe you've had someone just, favor someone else and kind of ignore you. You know what? Instead of forming that bitterness and that grudge, maybe today you realize that there's enough grace to go around and you take maybe a step towards someone, even if it's just in your heart and mind. And so maybe in group, you need to write on one side of the paper, hey, here's someone I need to ask for forgiveness from. And then on another side of the piece of paper, maybe you just need to write, hey, here's someone in my heart and mind I need to take a step of forgiveness towards. And again, there are unhealthy relationships to where, no. You don't need to go to that person, but in your heart and mind and before the Lord, you need to make that decision. And here's the thing. I realize this is not easy to do. I realize this is really, 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 really hard to do. Because we say things like, no. It's too much. Like what someone else has done to me is too much. Or they say like, no, I've forgiven this person like 1,000,000 times. Maybe it's just a friend. And you're like, no, I've forgiven them 1,000,000 times. I don't have enough left in me. And we talk about grace and forgiveness like it's this precious commodity. Like there's not enough of it to go around. But what do we hear in the story? Both brothers come together. One extends grace and forgiveness to the other. And he says, no, dude. I have enough. I have enough. Because in God's economy and God's goodness and his grace, there's always enough grace to go around. We don't need to operate, especially as Christians, like there's a lack of grace. Like, well, I got to hold on to my grace. I can't just be giving it out. No, there's no lack of grace. There is enough to go around. So we see in this story this beautiful picture of reconciliation, forgiveness, and grace. And there's enough to go around. Let's give it up for our players here. Let's give it up for them. You guys can go backstage. Now, while we see this on a human level and a human dimension in human relationships, we also see something more profound here. We also see a picture of something better that is to come in the future. And we see a picture of what God has done for us. Because we, like Jacob, have wronged one another, we've hurt one another, we have manipulated one another, and we've done wrong. And we are fully deserving of other people's wrath, of God's wrath, of punishment. Like, we've done stuff wrong. And sometimes people don't like that. They're like, I don't like the sound of that. I don't like that. I deserve punishment. Well, no, like, you wouldn't want someone to rob you and not have any consequence. You wouldn't want someone to do something extremely hurtful to you with no consequence. God is about justice. And we want God to be just and to make things right. And so, yeah, we have to have it both ways, though. So we have done wrong like Jacob, and we are deserving of punishment. But here's the thing, and this is what's so beautiful in the story. As we approach God, like Jacob approached Esau, here's what happens. Just like in the story last week, God runs to us. Not in anger, not in hostility, but in grace. And that's what we see in the story today. And he falls on our neck and he embraces us. Just like the father from last week and just like Esau from this week. But what's more, not only are we met with grace when we come to God, even though we've wronged him and we've wronged other people, even though we deserve punishment, God does one better, even than just meeting us where we are. God, just like Jacob in the story, God actually offers that same offering that Jacob puts forth, that same kafar, that same atonement, that same peace offering. And that's what God did in Jesus. Essentially, God says, whoa, just like Jacob in the story, you wronged me, you wronged other people, you deserve punishment. But here's what I'm going to do. It says God took on flesh and made his dwelling among us in Jesus. God in the flesh, God in the bod. And he said, hold up, no, Jacob. No, you and you and you and you. I'm actually going to pay that punishment for you. I'm actually going to make that peace offering for you. I'm actually going to be that kafar, that atonement for you. And I'm going to be that thing, just like we saw in the story, that's going to stand between punishment and you. That thing that's going to make peace between the person you've wronged and you. And that's exactly what we see in Jesus. That atonement, that peace offering. So as you tonight realize that we all are like Jacob, and as you move towards God, slowly and cautiously maybe, realize that he's running to you, waiting to fall on your neck, waiting to embrace you with grace. Not looking at you and punishing you as your sin deserves, but seeing that atonement of Jesus, that peace offering of Jesus, putting you in right standing and reconciliation with God. And I know a lot of people have this notion of this angry God who's just waiting to strike you down. No, God has made the first move. God has run towards you tonight. And so, quite frankly, we should accept that, believe that, receive that, and walk in it, and we should extend that same kind of grace to others. So tonight, may you realize that God always runs towards his children. May you realize that we have been shown much grace to show much grace. And when it comes to forgiving others or accepting forgiveness for yourself, may you hear those words of Jacob and Esau. I have enough. When it comes to God's grace, I have enough. When it comes to God's love, I have enough. And when it comes to God's lavish kindness, I have enough. Grace and peace to you, Sublime.